The operations room at Camp Denali Forward Operating Base runs on organized panic. 7 screens, 4 radios, 2 satellite feeds refreshing every 90 seconds with updated imagery from a valley 73 kilometers northeast, where, according to the most recent intelligence assessment, 3 civilian aid workers were being held in a compound accessible by exactly 1 road and defended by a rotating guard element that had, in the last 18 hours, increased from 4 men to 11. The clock on the wall reads 14:37. The window for viable extraction closes at 22:00, when a weather system moving in from the northwest would ground every rotary wing asset they had for a minimum of 36 hours. 7 hours and 23 minutes to solve a problem that had already defeated 2 planning cycles, 1 joint task force, and a very expensive satellite communication system that kept dropping signal at the worst possible moments. She sat at the back of the room, not assigned to a workstation, not listed on the personnel manifest pinned beside the door. A folding chair, a sealed folder on her knee, a cup of black coffee growing cold beside her boot. She had been there since 0900. She had not spoken once, not because she had nothing to say, because no one had asked. The team assembled around the central table was experienced, legitimate, decorated, most of them. 2 Special Forces majors, a signals warrant officer who had forgotten more about communications architecture than most people ever learn, a CIA liaison whose name tag said Morrison and whose actual name was something else entirely, and the officer running the room, Lieutenant Colonel David Renshaw, 12 years in special operations, 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, a desk drawer full of commendations and a planning style that prioritized consensus, caution, and coordination in that order. Renshaw was not a bad officer, he was a careful one. There is a difference, and the difference matters most when time is the variable you can no longer afford to spend. "We need 2 more hours on the exfil route analysis," he said, circling a point on the topographic display with a red marker. "Before we commit to a primary HLZ, I want confirmation on that second ridge elevation. The imagery we have is 22 hours old." "We don't have 2 hours," one of the majors said. Not argumentatively, just factually. "Then we ask for more time. The window, I know what the window is." She looked at the map from her chair. She had been looking at it for 6 hours, not casually, the way a surgeon looks at an imaging scan before the first incision. Total attention, specific purpose, looking not at the problem that was visible, but at the problem beneath it. The exfil route debate was real, but it was not the primary obstacle. The primary obstacle was the compound entry vector, specifically the assumption embedded in both previous planning cycles that approach from the south was impossible because of the guard rotation. She had seen something in the satellite feed that suggested the rotation wasn't a rotation at all. It was a pattern that looked like a rotation, a critical distinction, because a rotation is unpredictable within a range. A pattern has a gap, and the gap in this particular pattern occurred at the same 12-minute window every 94 minutes, like clockwork, because whoever designed the security schedule had been trained by someone who thought in 90-minute tactical blocks and hadn't considered that satellite imagery analysts think in different increments. She had confirmed this gap 3 times across 4 feed cycles. Nobody else had noticed. They were focused on the ridge elevation. She said nothing. Not yet. Because interrupting Renshaw's planning cycle without being asked would produce defensiveness before it produced consideration, and defensiveness in a planning room kills good information faster than bad intelligence does. She had learned this in the first of her 4 deployments and not forgotten it in any of the 3 that followed. "Let's move to the entry package," Morrison said. "We're losing time on the south approach debate. Can we table that and work the primary breach point?" "We can't table the south approach," the signals warrant said. "If the primary HLZ is compromised, the south is the only secondary that gets the asset out before the weather hits." "The south approach is compromised by the guard rotation," Renshaw said. "We've been over this." "We've been over the imagery," she said. Every head turned, not because her voice was loud, because it was the first time she had spoken in 6 hours in a room where everyone else had been speaking almost continuously. and the contrast produced a quality of attention that no volume could have manufactured. Renshaw looked at her with the particular expression of a senior officer encountering an unexpected variable, not hostile, not welcoming, evaluating. "I'm sorry," he said. "You are attached to the CIA liaison element," she said, which was true in the way that many accurate statements are technically complete while leaving certain significant details for a different conversation. "I wasn't briefed on an additional member." "No, sir." Renshaw's expression tightened. Morrison, across the table, made no particular movement, which was itself a particular movement. "What did you say about the south approach?" Morrison asked her. "I said we've been over the imagery. I haven't heard anyone discuss the gap in the guard sequence." "There's no gap," one of the majors said. "The rotation is continuous." "It's not a rotation," she said. "It's a pattern. And it has a 12-minute gap every 94 minutes. The next occurrence is in 2 hours and 11 minutes. Silence. The kind that means people are either dismissing you or calculating. Both look identical, from the outside, for the first few seconds. "Walk me through that," Morrison said. She stood, crossed the room. She had not been invited to the central table, but she moved to it with the calm authority of someone who has long since stopped waiting for invitations in rooms where waiting costs lives. She pulled up the satellite feed archive on the nearest terminal and moved through the timestamps with the efficiency of someone who had already done this work, already confirmed the conclusion, and was now simply showing her work to people who hadn't seen it yet. She talked for 4 minutes, not a presentation, not a briefing, a conversation she was having with the data out loud in front of people who needed to hear it. When she finished, Renshaw was looking at the screen, not at her. At the screen, where the pattern she had identified was sitting in the imagery like a door that had been there all along, waiting for someone to see it as a door rather than a wall. 2 hours and 11 minutes, he repeated. 2 hours and 8 now. He looked at Morrison. Morrison was already on his phone. The disagreement came 40 minutes later. She had proposed the entry vector. The team had confirmed the pattern, run the timeline 3 times, stress-tested the variables. The math held. The gap was real, the window was real, and the revised plan she had outlined on the whiteboard in 40 minutes of precise, unhurried work was the only version that used the gap before the weather closed the entire operation permanently. But Renshaw wanted sign-off from Theatre Command before he moved. She understood the impulse, understood it completely. Sign-off meant shared responsibility, and shared responsibility meant that if something went wrong, it didn't go wrong on him alone. She also understood that reaching Theatre Command, getting the right person on the line, walking them through a revised plan they had not seen, and receiving authorization would take a minimum of 90 minutes. They had 83. "Sir," she said, "we don't have time to wait for authorization. We don't move without it." "With respect, sir, we do. The window closes in. I know what the window does." His voice had an edge now. Not anger, exactly. The pressure of a man being asked to make a decision he wasn't certain was his to make. "This plan is a significant deviation from the approved operational parameters. I am not authorizing a mission deviation of this magnitude without..." "Then don't authorize it." The room went completely still. Renshaw stared at her. "Excuse me?" She held his gaze. Her voice was exactly what it had been since she first spoke. Level, unhurried, carrying no apology and no defiance, just the plain weight of what she was about to say. "Don't authorize it, sir. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me take it. You don't have command authority over..." "Check with Morrison." Something moved across Renshaw's face. A recalibration happening in real time. He looked at Morrison. Morrison set down his phone. The person he'd called had apparently already called someone else, because his expression had changed from operational focus to a specific kind of careful stillness that people develop when they're standing in the presence of something they didn't fully understand until just now. "Colonel," Morrison said, "you may want to check the classification annex on her attachment order. I've seen her attachment order. She's listed as..." "The unredacted version," Morrison said. Renshaw looked at him for a long moment. Then he crossed to the filing cabinet beside the door, retrieved a folder and read. He read it twice. When he looked up, something had changed in the way he was holding himself. Not chastened exactly, more like a man who had been navigating by one map and just discovered that the actual terrain was considerably more complex than the map indicated. She had 4 combat deployments. The first 2 were listed by theater only, locations redacted. The third showed an assignment to a joint special operations task force, role listed as assault element lead. The fourth listed her most recent position, mission commander, Tier 1 operations, a designation that existed in the kind of paperwork that doesn't circulate through normal channels and doesn't appear on standard personnel rosters. Her call sign, listed at the bottom of the page, was Foxline. Renshaw looked at it, looked at her. "You've run extractions like this before?" "Yes, sir." "How many?" 11 successful. 0 casualties across all of them. He closed the folder. "Morrison," he said, "get Theater Command on the line. Tell them we have a mission commander on site with Tier 1 authority, and she is taking the revised plan. Already in progress," Morrison said. He looked at her and gave her a brief nod that contained about 6 different things, most of them respectful. She turned back to the whiteboard. "We have 80 minutes, she said. "Let's finish the entry package." Nobody dismissed her after that. Not because of the folder, because of what happened when she took command of the room. It became efficient in a way it had not been in the 7 hours before. Questions got answers, variables got tested. The planning that had been cycling in frustrated loops for the better part of a day moved forward with the clean momentum of a process that knew where it was going. The 2 majors, who had been in the room longest and had the most invested in the original plan, adapted with the professionalism of people who understood that mission success was a different goal from being right. One of them ran the exfil coordination without being asked. The other checked the revised timeline against the weather data and confirmed the window. The signals warrant officer, who had said nothing beyond technical answers since she'd taken the floor, looked up once from his station. "The South Approach Plan," he said. "Whoever designed that entry sequence has done compound work before." "Yes," she said without elaborating. He nodded, returned to his screen. This was the language of people who operated at a certain level: economy, acknowledgement, forward motion, no ceremony. The job in front of you, and the next one after that. At 17:22, the revised operation order was transmitted to the assault element. At 19:09, 3 minutes inside the gap she had identified 18 hours after every other analyst had missed it, the assault element breached the compound via the South Approach. At 19:23, all 3 hostages were secure. At 20:17, they were on the extraction platform, climbing toward altitude, the weather system pushing in behind them like a curtain being drawn across the valley. The window had closed 11 minutes after extraction was complete. Renshaw found her in the operations room after the confirmation came in. Most of the team had moved to the secure comms suite for the debrief call with Theater Command. The room was quieter now, screens still running, coffee machine cycling into its 3rd hour of continuous operation. He stood beside her and looked at the topographic display where the valley still glowed faintly on the main monitor. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't," she said. "You didn't know. I made assumptions." "Everyone makes assumptions," she said. "The question is how long you hold them after the evidence changes." He absorbed this. "You were here from 0900, he said. "You saw the pattern in the first few hours." "Around hour 2, yes. Why didn't you say something sooner?" She turned and looked at him directly, not with reproach, with the candor of someone who has had this conversation enough times to have learned what the honest answer actually is. "Because at hour 2, you didn't know me. You had 7 hours of planning invested in a framework you believed in. If I'd walked up to that table at hour 2 and told you there was a gap in the guard sequence that changed the entire entry plan, you would have been polite, you would have noted my input, and then you would have continued with the plan you had." She paused. "I've seen it happen, 11 times in different rooms, with different people, so I waited until the time pressure made the alternative visible." "That's a significant gamble," he said. "If the timeline had been shorter, it wasn't. It could have been." "Yes," she said. It could have been. That's the calculus you run when you walk into a room where no one knows who you are. She looked back at the monitor. You don't always have the luxury of being heard before you're needed. Sometimes you have to wait until the need becomes undeniable, and then you have to be ready to move the moment it does. He was quiet for a moment. Foxline, he said. The call sign, spoken carefully, the way people say names they've just learned carry more weight than they initially appeared to. Yes. Where are you going after this? She picked up her sealed folder from the chair where it had been sitting since 0900. Wherever the next room is, she said. She walked toward the door. Behind her, the operations room continued its hum of screens and satellite feeds and radios, searching frequencies for the next transmission. 3 people were safe tonight who had not been safe 24 hours ago. The valley on the main monitor showed nothing moving, just terrain and distance, and the slow advance of a weather system that had arrived too late to matter. She had been in the room the entire time, watching, waiting, ready. The door closed behind her. The room she left behind was different from the room she'd entered that morning, not because of what she'd said, but because of how she'd said it, when she'd said it, and what she'd done when no one was watching. Stayed ready for 7 hours of being invisible, so that when the moment finally came, she could move without hesitation. That was the lesson the room would carry forward, not about rank, not about credentials, about the particular kind of patience that only people who have operated under real pressure ever fully develop, the patience that knows the right moment is coming and holds everything ready until it does. Subscribe to Steelheart Stories, where the most dangerous person in the room is sometimes the quietest one.